Have you ever wondered if the person cutting your hair could literally save your life? What if I told you that a simple trip to the salon turned into a race against time that would expose a deadly secret hiding beneath a teenager's beautiful blonde hair? This isn't just another medical drama. This is the incredible true story of how a small-town hairdresser's sharp eyes caught what doctors missed, and how an entire community came together to fight for one girl's future. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll never look at your hairstylist the same way again. Main content: picture this. It's just another ordinary Tuesday afternoon in Mapleton, Ohio. The kind of sleepy industrial town where everybody knows your business before you do, but they'll still show up with a casserole when life gets tough. The old factory that once provided jobs for half the town had been shuttered for a decade, leaving behind economic scars that hadn't quite healed. But life goes on in places like this, and people find ways to make do. On the corner of Maple and Elm Street stands a converted Victorian house with chipped blue paint and a wraparound porch that's seen better days. This is Small Blessing Salon, and on this particular afternoon, the familiar sounds of hair dryers humming and women chatting fill the air. It's the kind of place where secrets are shared over hair treatments and life advice comes free with every cut. Sarah Parker is working at her station, her red hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, her movements precise and confident. At 32, she carries herself with the quiet efficiency of someone who's seen more than her fair share of life's curveballs. Those tired eyes of hers have witnessed things that would make most people wake up in cold sweats, but we'll get to that part of her story in a moment. The salon door chimes as 14-year-old Emily Wilson steps inside, bringing with her a gust of October wind that ruffles the appointment book. Emily is one of those kids who seems older than her years. Intelligent blue eyes, honey blonde hair, and the kind of quiet strength that comes from facing hardship too early. She's been the talk of the town recently, not for teenage drama, but for her incredible artistic talent. Her self-portrait hanging in the town library is so hauntingly beautiful that it stops people in their tracks. But Emily has been carrying a secret, one that's been eating away at her for months. The blinding headaches that strike without warning, making her world blur and spin. The numbness in her hands during art class that's caused her to drop brushes, earning giggles from classmates who don't understand. She's been popping aspirin like candy, hiding the pills from her grandmother Martha, who's already working extra shifts just to keep food on the table. You see, Emily's life changed forever 3 years ago when cancer took her mother. Now she lives with her 72-year-old grandmother in a house where every dollar is stretched thin, where medication costs and roof repairs compete for priority, where pride often wins over practical needs. Martha Wilson is the kind of woman who'd rather go without than accept charity, the kind who believes in handling problems quietly and with dignity. When Emily finally convinced her grandmother to take her to see Dr. James Reynolds, Mapleton's family doctor for 25 years, she was hoping for answers. Instead, she got a diagnosis that felt like a dismissal: stress. Teenage problems, the doctor said with a big laugh and a wave of his hand. Take some aspirin, get some rest. Case closed. But here's where our story really begins. As Sarah Parker guides Emily to the shampoo station, her trained eyes that once worked in the chaos of a county hospital emergency room, begin to notice things. The way Emily's face tenses during the hair washing. How she grips the sides of the basin when the water hits a certain spot. The almost imperceptible way she flinches when pressure is applied to specific areas of her scalp. Sarah Parker wasn't always a hairdresser. For 10 grueling years, she worked as a nurse in the ER at County General, where she developed an almost supernatural ability to spot trouble before it announced itself. She'd seen the subtle signs that separated the worried well from the truly sick. She'd learned to trust her instincts, to push when others would retreat, to be the voice for patients who couldn't advocate for themselves. But all of that changed because of a boy named Jason Miller. Jason was 16, not much older than Emily. He came to the ER 3 times with complaints of headaches, vision problems, and fatigue. Each time, the attending physician sent him home with reassurances and over-the-counter pain medication. Sarah had seen something in that boy's eyes, a subtle neurological sign that made her stomach clench with worry. She'd tried to voice her concerns, had suggested additional testing, but she was just a nurse questioning a doctor's judgment. The third time Jason Miller walked through those ER doors, he collapsed in a seizure that would be his last conscious moment. The brain tumor that had been growing silently in his head had finally claimed its victory. Sarah held his mother's hand as they made the devastating decision to withdraw life support. She'd known something was wrong from the very first visit, but she hadn't pushed hard enough, hadn't trusted her instincts over institutional hierarchy. That night, Sarah Parker walked out of County General Hospital for the last time. She couldn't save lives if no one would listen to her concerns. She couldn't be part of a system that valued authority over observation, credentials over compassion. So she came home to Mapleton, took over her mother's struggling salon, and tried to convince herself that cutting hair was safer than trying to save lives. But you can take the nurse out of the hospital, as they say. As Sarah continues working on Emily's hair, every alarm bell in her head is going off. The teenager's symptoms aren't just concerning, they're terrifying. When Emily mentions that the headaches have been going on for months, that they're getting worse, that sometimes her vision blurs so badly she can't see the board at school, Sarah's medical training kicks into overdrive. And then she sees it. While parting Emily's damp hair, Sarah's fingers encounter something that makes her blood run cold. Hidden beneath those beautiful blonde strands is a dark, irregular growth about the size of a dime. It has uneven borders, color variations, and a slightly raised surface, all the classic warning signs that any medical professional would recognize as potentially malignant. The moment Sarah's comb touches it, Emily cries out in pain, her body going rigid with a sudden sharp sensation. It's as if every piece of a deadly puzzle suddenly clicks into place. The headaches, the vision problems, the numbness, and now this suspicious growth. Emily Wilson isn't dealing with teenage stress. She's fighting for her life. But here's the heartbreaking part. Emily and her grandmother can't afford another doctor's visit. The $80 appointment with Dr. Reynolds has already maxed out their credit card. They're behind on the electricity bill, the roof needs repairs, and Martha is already working extra shifts at the church charity shop just to buy Emily's art supplies. This is where Sarah Parker faces her own moment of truth. She could finish the haircut, send Emily home, and hope for the best. She could mind her own business and stick to what she knows: scissors, hair products, and small-town gossip. Or she could risk everything to be the advocate that Jason Miller never had. Sarah makes her choice. She gently explains to Emily that she used to be a nurse, that what she's seeing requires immediate medical attention. She takes photos of the growth, shows them to Emily and her grandmother, and explains why waiting isn't an option. The teenager's face goes pale as she stares at the images, finally seeing what's been hiding under her hair. But Sarah doesn't stop there. She reaches out to Dr. Mike Brennan, a neurologist at Riverside Medical Center who she'd worked with during her hospital days. They'd briefly dated, and despite their romantic relationship ending, Mike had always respected Sarah's clinical instincts. When she calls him and explains the situation, he agrees to drive to Mapleton that very evening for an informal consultation. What happens next is a masterclass in community medicine and human compassion. Dr. Brennan's examination confirms Sarah's worst fears. Emily appears to have both a suspicious melanoma on her scalp and symptoms suggesting a brain tumor. The teenager needs immediate, expensive medical intervention that her family simply cannot afford. But here's where the story takes an incredible turn. Dr. Brennan doesn't just diagnose and disappear. He arranges for Emily to be seen the next morning at Riverside Medical Center under their charitable care program. He coordinates with specialists, expedites testing, and ensures that financial barriers won't prevent this young woman from getting the treatment she desperately needs. Meanwhile, word spreads through Mapleton like wildfire. By the time Sarah opens the salon the next morning, there's already a prayer chain active at First Baptist Church. Mrs. Abernathy, Emily's former art teacher, is organizing meal trains. Betty from the library has started an online fundraiser that's already raised $2,000. The high school art department is planning an auction of student work in Emily's honor. This is small-town America at its absolute finest. When one of their own is in trouble, the community doesn't just offer thoughts and prayers, they roll up their sleeves and get to work. The medical testing confirms the worst-case scenario. Emily has both a stage 3 melanoma on her scalp and a benign but problematic meningioma pressing against her brain. The cancer is aggressive, with irregular borders and deep invasion that require immediate surgical intervention. The brain tumor, while non-cancerous, is causing the neurological symptoms that have been plaguing her for months. Here's where the story becomes even more intense. Emily needs 2 separate surgeries, one to remove the melanoma with wide margins, and another to perform a craniotomy and remove the brain tumor. Both procedures are risky, both are expensive, and the timing of each could affect the success of the other. The doctors are in disagreement. Dr. Harrison, the dermatological surgeon, wants to focus on the aggressive melanoma first, arguing that cancer takes priority. Dr. Levine, the neurosurgeon, believes the brain tumor poses more immediate danger and should be addressed without delay. Both are right in their own way, and both are asking Martha Wilson to make an impossible choice. This is Sarah's Jason Miller moment all over again, but this time she's not going to stay silent. Drawing on her nursing experience and her fierce determination to advocate for Emily, Sarah suggests bringing in a third opinion, a specialist who deals with exactly these kinds of complex, multifaceted cases. Dr. Eleanor Chen from Johns Hopkins agrees to a telemedicine consultation. She reviews Emily's case overnight and proposes something that hadn't been fully explored, a coordinated surgical approach where both procedures are performed in sequence during a single operation. It's riskier in terms of infection and anesthesia time, but it addresses both life-threatening conditions without forcing the family to choose between them. The surgery is scheduled for the following week, giving the community time to rally even more support. The online fundraiser grows to $15,000. Local restaurants donate meals for the families keeping vigil. High school students make and sell Team Emily bracelets. Even Dr. Reynolds, stung by his earlier misdiagnosis, contributes significantly and promises a year of free follow-up care. But nothing can prepare Martha Wilson for the phone call she receives the night before surgery. Emily, with a maturity far beyond her 14 years, sits her grandmother down and shows her something that takes everyone's breath away. 3 months earlier, long before anyone suspected the truth, Emily had created a self-portrait that was disturbingly prophetic. The drawing showed her head as partially transparent, revealing a dark, spider-like mass inside her skull with black tendrils reaching toward her eyes and spine. The detail was stunning, the technique beyond her years, but the subject matter was terrifying. "I felt compelled to draw it," Emily explains quietly. "It started as a dream about something growing inside me, reaching out. I told myself it was just my fear of ending up like Mom, but now." The art teacher had called it macabre but compelling, and entered it in a regional competition without Emily's knowledge, where it won first place. Looking at it now, knowing what they know, it seems less like teenage artistic expression and more like a premonition. The day of surgery arrives with all the weight and ceremony of a small-town crisis. The waiting room at Riverside Medical Center fills with Mapleton residents who've made the hour-long drive to show their support. Pastor Williams brings coffee and homemade cinnamon rolls. Mrs. Abernathy coordinates a rotation of visitors so Martha never feels alone. The entire community holds its breath as Emily Wilson fights the battle of her young life. The surgery takes longer than expected, much longer. What was supposed to be a 4-hour procedure stretches into 6 hours, then 7. Sarah finds herself pacing the surgical waiting room with the same nervous energy she once channeled in the ER, her mind racing through every possible complication and contingency. When Dr. Harrison finally emerges, his expression is unreadable. The melanoma, he explains, was more extensive than the imaging had suggested. It had deeper invasive projections into the scalp tissue, requiring a more aggressive excision than originally planned. They'd successfully removed all visible cancer with wide margins, but the pathology would determine the full extent of the disease. Dr. Levine's report on the brain surgery is more encouraging. The meningioma was successfully removed without apparent complications, and Emily's vital signs remained stable throughout the craniotomy. The tumor had indeed been pressing against critical areas of her brain, explaining all the neurological symptoms she'd been experiencing. But recovery is never a straight line, especially for a teenager whose body has endured such extensive surgical trauma. Emily spends 3 days in the pediatric ICU, connected to monitors that track every heartbeat, every breath. There are moments of terror, a blood pressure drop that sends medical teams rushing to her bedside, concerns about intracranial pressure that require additional procedures. Martha Wilson ages visibly during those 72 hours, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair beside her granddaughter's bed, watching the rise and fall of the machines that are keeping Emily alive. Sarah barely leaves the hospital, coordinating updates with the growing crowd of Mapleton residents who've established a permanent vigil in the main waiting area. The pathology results bring both relief and new challenges. The brain tumor was indeed benign, with no signs of malignancy or likelihood of recurrence. But the melanoma pathology confirms stage 3 cancer, meaning it had progressed locally and may have spread to Emily's lymph nodes. Additional surgery is required, followed by months of immunotherapy to prevent metastasis. This is where the story could have taken a devastating turn toward medical bankruptcy and family destruction. The costs are mounting: multiple surgeries, extended hospital stays, specialist consultations, and now months of cancer treatment. Even with charitable care programs, the financial burden threatens to crush a family already living paycheck to paycheck. But Mapleton isn't finished fighting for Emily Wilson. The online fundraiser explodes, reaching $50,000 as news of Emily's story spreads beyond their small town. High school students from surrounding counties organize car washes and bake sales. The regional newspaper picks up the story, bringing donations from strangers who are moved by this young woman's courage and her community's devotion. Local businesses step up in ways that restore your faith in human nature. The hardware store donates materials and labor to fix Martha's leaking roof. The grocery store provides food cards. The gas station offers free fuel for trips to and from the medical center. Even the bank restructures Martha's mortgage to reduce her monthly payments. Emily's recovery is slow but steady. The immunotherapy treatments leave her exhausted and nauseous, but she approaches each session with the same quiet determination that has characterized her entire ordeal. She continues her art during treatment, creating a powerful series of paintings that document her journey from diagnosis through recovery. The artwork is remarkable, not just for its technical skill, but for its emotional honesty. One piece shows a salon chair with scissors hovering over blonde hair, representing that pivotal moment when Sarah first noticed the growth. Another depicts Martha praying beside a hospital bed, capturing the depth of a grandmother's love and fear. But it's the final painting that takes everyone's breath away, a young woman's back view, surgical scars partially hidden by hair, but instead of concealing the scars, Emily has transformed them into the trunk of a blooming tree with branches that burst with vibrant colors across the composition. She calls the series Second Chances, and it becomes the centerpiece of her application to art school. 6 months after that terrifying day in the salon, Emily Wilson walks across the stage at her high school graduation ceremony. She's cancer-free, her hair has grown back in beautiful waves that artfully conceal her surgical scars, and she's been accepted to the Michigan School of Art and Design on a full scholarship. But the story doesn't end there. Emily's experience has changed her life's direction in ways no one could have predicted. She announces her intention to become a medical illustrator and cancer educator, using her artistic talents to help doctors communicate with patients, especially young people facing similar diagnoses. "I wouldn't have found this path without everything that happened," she tells Sarah during her final appointment at the salon before leaving for college. "Even the horrible parts, they showed me how I could use my art to help people in my situation." The ripple effects of Emily's story continue to spread through Mapleton and beyond. Dr. Reynolds has completely changed his approach to teenage patients, particularly young women whose symptoms might previously have been dismissed as hormonal or stress-related. He's implemented new protocols in his practice and has become a vocal advocate for thorough patient evaluation regardless of age. Sarah Parker has found her way back to being a healer, though in a very different setting than she'd ever imagined. The small room adjacent to her salon now houses a community health screening program where people can get basic health assessments and learn about warning signs they might otherwise ignore. She's trained other salon and barbershop owners in the region to recognize concerning symptoms and refer clients for medical evaluation. The program has already identified several people with serious conditions that might have gone undetected: a barber who noticed an irregular mole on a customer's neck, a hairstylist who recognized signs of a stroke in an elderly client, a salon owner who spotted symptoms of an abusive relationship and connected a customer with resources for help. Martha Wilson, now in her 70s, has become an unlikely advocate for healthcare access and early detection. She speaks at community events, sharing Emily's story and encouraging people not to delay seeking medical attention because of financial concerns. She's helped several families navigate the complex world of charitable care programs and medical assistance. The bond between Sarah and the Wilson family has grown beyond client and service provider into something resembling chosen family. When Sarah begins dating Mike Brennan again, the neurologist who came to Mapleton that evening to examine Emily, Martha and Emily are among the first to celebrate the relationship. Dr. Brennan's wife Allison, now 7 months pregnant, has become one of Sarah's regular clients, and the three of them have formed an unexpected but comfortable friendship. Mike often jokes that he's dating a woman who saved his patient before he even knew she needed saving. The Small Blessing Salon continues to thrive, but it's no longer just a place where people come to get their hair done. It's become a community gathering spot where health concerns are discussed openly, where people are encouraged to trust their instincts about their bodies, and where early detection has become a community value rather than an individual responsibility. Emily's story has been featured in medical journals as an example of how trained observers outside the traditional healthcare system can play crucial roles in early detection and patient advocacy. Sarah has been invited to speak at nursing conferences about the importance of trusting clinical instincts and the various ways healthcare professionals can contribute to patient care even outside hospital settings. But perhaps the most important legacy of this story is what it says about the power of community and the courage to act when something doesn't seem right. In a world where we're often told to mind our own business, to stay in our lanes, to defer to authority figures, Emily Wilson's story reminds us that sometimes the most important thing we can do is pay attention and speak up. Sarah Parker could have finished that haircut and sent Emily home with best wishes and a new style. Instead, she chose to trust her training, her instincts, and her commitment to never again let someone suffer because she was too afraid or too polite to voice her concerns. The Wilson family could have quietly accepted Dr. Reynolds' diagnosis of stress and continued managing Emily's symptoms with over-the-counter medication. Instead, they chose to listen when someone with medical expertise offered a different perspective, even when it meant accepting help from their community. The people of Mapleton could have offered thoughts and prayers and moved on with their lives. Instead, they chose to organize, fundraise, advocate, and demonstrate that small communities can accomplish extraordinary things when they work together. Now, 3 years later, Emily Wilson is thriving at art school, her cancer remains in remission, and her neurological symptoms have completely resolved. She's created a scholarship fund for young people facing medical challenges who want to pursue artistic careers. Her artwork continues to win recognition, but more importantly, it's being used in hospitals and treatment centers to help other young patients understand and cope with their diagnoses. Martha Wilson still lives in the same house on the outskirts of Mapleton, but the roof is fixed, the bills are manageable, and she sleeps peacefully knowing her granddaughter has a bright future ahead of her. She volunteers at the community health screening program and has become something of a local celebrity, known for her direct approach to encouraging people to take their health seriously. Dr. Reynolds has transformed his practice and become a model for how primary care physicians can better serve their communities. He's established relationships with specialists in the region and has created protocols to ensure that concerning symptoms are thoroughly investigated regardless of the patient's age or economic status. Sarah Parker has found peace with her past and clarity about her future. She's no longer the frustrated nurse who left medicine because the system failed a patient she cared about. She's now a healthcare advocate who has created her own system for catching problems before they become tragedies. The salon continues to buzz with activity, but now the conversations often turn to health and wellness, early detection, and community support. Sarah has trained her staff to recognize concerning symptoms and to approach such conversations with sensitivity and knowledge. Closing. So, what can we learn from Emily Wilson's incredible journey from teenage artist to cancer survivor to future healthcare advocate? What does her story tell us about the power of observation, the importance of trusting our instincts, and the remarkable things that can happen when communities come together? First, it reminds us that expertise comes in many forms, and sometimes the person best positioned to notice a problem isn't necessarily the one with the most impressive credentials. Sarah Parker's nursing background gave her the knowledge to recognize Emily's symptoms, but it was her decision to act on that knowledge that made all the difference. Second, it shows us that early detection can literally be the difference between life and death. Emily's melanoma was aggressive and had already progressed to stage 3 by the time it was discovered. If Sarah hadn't noticed it when she did, if she'd simply finished the haircut and sent Emily home, the cancer could have metastasized throughout her body before anyone realized what was happening. Third, it demonstrates the incredible power of community support when facing medical challenges. The financial burden of Emily's treatment could have destroyed her family's future, but the people of Mapleton refused to let that happen. They organized, fundraised, and advocated until every barrier to Emily's treatment was overcome. Fourth, it reminds us that dismissing symptoms because of a patient's age, gender, or economic status can have devastating consequences. Emily's headaches and vision problems were real and serious, not teenage drama or stress-related complaints. Young people can and do develop serious medical conditions, and their symptoms deserve the same thorough evaluation that would be provided to older patients. Finally, it shows us that second chances, whether in careers, relationships, or health, are precious gifts that should never be taken for granted. Sarah got a second chance to be the advocate she wasn't able to be for Jason Miller. Emily got a second chance at life thanks to early detection and excellent treatment. The Wilson family got a second chance at financial stability thanks to their community's support. But here's the thing, you don't have to be a former nurse or live in a small town to make a difference in someone's life. You just have to be willing to pay attention, to trust your instincts when something doesn't seem right, and to speak up even when it might be easier to stay silent. Maybe you're a teacher who notices that a student's behavior has changed dramatically. Maybe you're a friend who observes that someone's complaints about feeling unwell are becoming more frequent and more serious. Maybe you're a family member who realizes that a loved one's symptoms aren't being taken seriously by their healthcare provider. In each of these situations, you have a choice. You can assume that someone else will notice, that the experts know best, that it's not really your business to get involved. Or you can choose to be like Sarah Parker, someone who trusts their observations, who advocates for people who might not be able to advocate for themselves, who refuses to accept it's probably nothing when their instincts are screaming that something is wrong. Emily Wilson's story reminds us that heroes don't always wear capes or work in hospitals or carry impressive titles. Sometimes they're hairdressers who pay attention, communities that refuse to abandon their own, and teenagers who face their fears with courage and grace. Sometimes they're people just like you, who choose to care enough to notice, brave enough to speak up, and determined enough to keep fighting until the right help arrives. The next time someone in your life mentions symptoms that don't seem quite right, remember Emily Wilson. Remember that teenage stress doesn't usually cause severe headaches and vision problems. Remember that "it's probably nothing" has been the last words of too many people who deserved better advocacy. Remember that in a world full of specialists and experts in systems, sometimes the most important diagnosis comes from someone who simply cares enough to look closer, ask harder questions, and refuse to accept easy answers when lives might be at stake. Emily Wilson is alive and thriving today because one person chose to trust her training and her instincts over politeness and protocol. Because a community chose love and action over thoughts and prayers. Because a young woman chose courage over fear in the face of life-threatening illness. Her story could be happening in your town, in your community, in your circle of family and friends. The only question is, when that moment comes, what choice will you make? Will you be the one who notices? The one who speaks up? The one who refuses to let someone suffer in silence when you have the power to help? Because in the end, that's what Emily Wilson's story is really about. The extraordinary difference that ordinary people can make when they choose to pay attention, speak up, and never give up on each other. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the power of community and the importance of advocacy, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe that everyone deserves to have someone in their corner who will fight for them. And subscribe because stories like Emily's need to be told. They remind us of the very best of humanity and inspire us to be the kind of people who notice, who care, and who act when action is needed most. Remember, you might be someone's Sarah Parker. You might be the person who notices what others miss, who speaks up when others stay silent, who makes the difference between tragedy and triumph. Trust your instincts, pay attention to the people around you, and never underestimate the power of caring enough to get involved. Emily Wilson's second chance at life started with one person who cared enough to look closer. Whose second chance might start with you?